Okay, let's unpack this. You've probably heard the idea that getting really good at something takes 10,000 hours of practice. It's kind of become this, accepted wisdom, almost a rule.
It really has. Yeah, it feels that way. It's a nice solid number, isn't it? Easy to sort of grab onto, gives people a target, even if it sounds, well, huge.
Exactly. Huge is the word. But what if that number, that rule, what if it's not the whole story? What if the path to being a real expert could actually be faster, maybe much faster?
Mm-hmm. That's the really interesting challenge that comes out of the sources we're looking at today for this deep dive. They definitely push back hard against that standard idea, and they offer some, well, pretty compelling alternatives for how skill develops quickly.
Right. So our mission here is to really dig into these sources. We're focusing on these ideas around shortcuts to mastery, specifically flow and match quality. Let's see if we can figure out how you might get good at something way faster than you thought. What are the core ideas here?
Sounds good. And I think to really get why challenging the 10,000-hour thing is such a big deal, it helps to, quickly touch on where it actually came from.
Good point. Yeah, it started with the psychologist Anders Ericsson, right? His research.
That's the one. His work was really centered on this concept he called deliberate practice.
And deliberate practice isn't just like noodling around on a guitar. It's specific.
Very specific. It means you're getting explicit instructions, very clear methods, you're getting immediate feedback on how you're doing right away, and then you're repeating really similar tasks over and over to hone that technique.
Okay. And then writers like Malcolm Gladwell really popularized it, and suddenly, bam, 10,000 hours became the magic number for being world-class.
It absolutely captured the public imagination, became the standard metric, yeah.
But okay, here's where it gets fascinating, based on what we read. Ericsson himself, the guy who came up with it, apparently pointed out some pretty big caveats to his own research.
Wait, really? He put limits on it himself?
Yeah. Well, the sources say he did. For one thing, he apparently noted that his original findings were from very specific fields. Think classical violinists, chess grandmasters, highly structured domains.
Oh, so not necessarily something like, I don't know, entrepreneurship or mountain biking?
Exactly. He apparently never claimed it was some universal law for everything.
Huh. Okay, what else?
And this is key. That 10,000 hours, it wasn't some magical finish line for mastery itself.
Yeah.
No, it was just an average time he saw in one specific group, top violinists, by the time they hit age 20. So it's kind of an arbitrary age marker for that group.
Ah, okay.
Sure.
An average for violinists by age 20. That puts a different spin on it.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the sources say he acknowledged, lots of people take longer. Sure. But crucially, some people could get there faster.
And that faster part is where these alternative ideas come in.
Spot on. That's what these sources jump on. One, for instance, looks at action and adventure sports athletes. Really interesting stuff drawing from the rise of Superman.
Ah. Okay. The people doing impossible seeming things. Big wave surfing, extreme skiing.
Those folks, yeah. And apparently they reach these incredible levels over decades sometimes, but often without following that strict 10,000-hour deliberate practice path.
Okay, so how did they do it then, if not through that traditional grind?
Well, a couple of big reasons emerge from the sources. First, think about where they train. It's inherently unpredictable, right? Mountains, oceans, the air.
Yeah, you can't really do the exact same ski run or catch the exact same wave 1,000 times with immediate, precise feedback on tiny errors. The conditions are always changing.
Exactly. So that kind of consistent, repetitive drilling often just wasn't feasible or maybe even helpful.
And the sources also mentioned their motivation was different.
Right. It wasn't always about that slow, patient refinement. Many of them apparently rejected the repetitive stuff. They were driven more by the immediate experience, chasing the stoke, that feeling, the instant gratification from the activity.
That makes a lot of sense. The reward is right there in the moment, not years down the line.
Yeah. And this connects really well with research from another source, David Epstein's work in Range.
Ah, Range. That book directly challenges the whole idea that you have to specialize super early to succeed.
Right. Totally. Epstein found that actually a lot of top performers across all sorts of fields didn't start narrow. They had what he calls a sampling period.
A sampling period?
Meaning they tried lots of different things first, different sports, different instruments, different subjects. They explored broadly before they really zoomed in on one thing.
So zigzagging around instead of a straight line from day one.
Exactly. And the argument is that zigzagging isn't wasted time. It's often the fastest way to the top because it helps you figure out something really important.
Which leads us nicely into the alternative path these sources lay out. Instead of just counting hours, they focus on two core ideas: match quality and flow.
Okay, let's break those down. Match quality first. You said this comes out of Epstein's research on the zigzag path.
Yeah, that's where it's highlighted. Match quality is basically finding a really tight fit between your skills, your genuine interests, and the actual work or activity you end up doing.
A tight fit. Skills, interests, activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you find that alignment, when you genuinely love what you're doing because it just clicks with who you are and what you're good at, the sources say that gives you a serious turbo boost.
A turbo boost. For learning.
For learning, for performance, yeah. The material suggests this high match quality strongly correlates with much faster learning rates. And get this, they argue it's actually a better predictor of long-term success than how early you started specializing.
Wow. Okay, I can sort of intuitively feel why loving something helps, but what's the mechanism? How does finding that fit actually accelerate the learning itself, according to the sources?
Well, it seems to boil down to attention, which, is the absolute bedrock of learning anything. When you find that great match quality, often through that exploration phase, it basically stacks up all your intrinsic motivators.
Intrinsic motivators?
Yeah.
Like curiosity, passion.
Exactly. Curiosity, passion, purpose, that natural drive to get better, autonomy. When those are all firing because you've found the right thing for you, your attention isn't just held, it's amplified. Significantly.
Ah, okay. So if you're genuinely fascinated and motivated from within, you just naturally pay better, deeper attention, and that's what speeds up learning.
That's the core idea. You're just way more engaged, neurologically speaking.
Okay. That's match quality. What about the second concept, flow? The sources call this the primary accelerator.
They do, flow state. We've probably all felt glimpses of it, right? That feeling of being completely absorbed in something, time just vanishes, and you're performing, effortlessly at your peak.
Yeah, being in the zone.
Exactly.
Okay.
The sources define it as that optimal state of consciousness. You feel your best, you perform your best.
And how does that state turbocharge learning? Is it just about focus again?
It's focus, but it's also neurochemistry. This is really cool.
Yeah.
During flow, your brain releases this potent cocktail of performance-enhancing feel-good neurochemicals. Dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins, anandamide, serotonin, the works.
Okay, sounds nice. But how does that help learning stick?
Because those chemicals do more than just make you feel good. They have a biological function related to memory and learning. They essentially act like a highlighter pen for your brain, tagging the experiences and information you're processing during flow as extremely important. Like, hey, pay attention, save this.
So your brain is literally flagging that information for better encoding and recall later.
Precisely. It's putting a huge biological emphasis tag on whatever you're learning while in that state. And the sources cite some pretty stunning research on this, showing that learning rates can potentially increase by 230% when you're in flow.
230%.
Yeah, it's a massive potential jump.
So, wait. If you can learn more than twice as fast,
Yeah.
how does that connect back to the 10,000-hour rule?
Well, it changes the math completely, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
sources explicitly state that if you can leverage flow, that fabled 10,000 hours could potentially be cut in half, or even more.
Cut in half. Wow. Okay. And is this flow-based accelerated learning why those action sports athletes could kind of bypass the traditional path?
That seems to be the argument, yeah. Even if they weren't doing textbook deliberate practice, they were constantly putting themselves in these high-stakes, high-skill situations, high challenge, immediate feedback from the environment. These are prime conditions for triggering flow states again and again. So they were tapping into this massive neurobiological learning accelerator, maybe without even realizing the science behind it.
Okay, so pulling this all together, the big message from these sources isn't saying hard work doesn't matter. It's that maybe just focusing on the sheer volume of hours, especially narrow repetitive hours, is... well, maybe not the full picture, or the smartest picture for many things.
Right. It's an incomplete model. The alternative path they present, the sort of shortest path to Superman, as one source calls it, really involves two things working together. First, doing the work to find activities where your deep interests, your natural aptitudes, and maybe your sense of purpose really align. That's finding your match quality.
Okay, find your fit first.
And second, once you've found that domain, actively learn how to cultivate and leverage the state of flow within that activity. Tap into that neurochemical superpower.
It really reframes the whole journey, doesn't it? Less about just grinding out the clock for years and years.
And more about working smarter. tapping into your own internal motivation, your own biology, to actually accelerate how quickly you learn and improve.
So, thinking about the listener, why is this important for you? How does knowing about match quality and flow actually help?
Well, understanding match quality, for example, could be huge if you feel like you're just spinning your wheels learning something. Maybe it's not just about more effort. Maybe it's a sign you haven't found the right fit yet. It kind of gives you permission to explore, to zigzag, until you find that thing where your passion really connects with your ability, instead of just forcing it down a path that feels wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. And knowing about flow, that changes how you might approach practice itself.
Absolutely. It shifts the focus from just putting in the hours to thinking about the quality of those hours. How can you set up your practice or learning environment to actually trigger flow more often? Finding that sweet spot of challenge, having clear goals, getting feedback, minimizing distractions. It makes practice potentially way more engaging, maybe even enjoyable, and simultaneously much more efficient for learning.
It really does flip the script on how we think about getting good at stuff,
Mm.
moving away from just tallying hours.
Towards finding your groove, finding that fit, and then intentionally riding those waves of peak performance and accelerated learning.
So here's a final thought to chew on. If flow really can boost learning so dramatically by harnessing our biology, what does that imply about a lot of our traditional learning systems, schools, training programs that often prioritize rigid structure over deep engagement and these peak states?
Yeah, and maybe more personally for you listening, how could you start being more intentional about seeking out flow, finding those conditions and the skills or areas you really want to master? Something to think about as you move forward.